Last night when I was watching you at the show, I was like, this is chamber music, but like deeper, better. Like
cool.
I was actually thinking, I think I'm in the wrong business because that's really what I want. I want to be in this tiny little space and I want that it's that same energy, it's that same communication and listening, and like I could see when, you know, the lock-in happened and those just like those moments. But there is something to me, I don't know, I think we
That's
all
cool.
have envy of each other's little, you know, playgrounds, but I always just find this kind of freedom that's really desirable.
Yeah, I love it too. I love that freedom. I really, variety is the spice of my life. I get to play with a bunch of really different great musicians, and every time it's a new conversation. But you're right, like we also sort of look on the other side of the grass, which is always greener, and say, oh wow, it'd be cool to, like, you know, just play the same thing every night for a crowd of 5,000 people that are singing, you know, the exact same, you know. It's all good. But I think, you know, it's natural to feel like a visitor to whatever scene, you know, and all that to say, come on in, you're welcome. Like you're already a part of this scene, and next time you get on the bandstand, treat it as a blank canvas and say, this is what we're gonna do, you know. And it might be more, you know, we might call it jazz or I don't know, classical. All these words probably don't do justice to the sound anyway. So just,
I do borrow, by the way. I do borrow. Well, for one thing, you don't know, but I'm a very, very good fake jazz player.
I've heard some stuff online. Yeah, no.
Can't improvise, but I can do the sound. But I felt myself. I was working with some students not very long ago, and they were playing some classical piano trio, and I said, you guys lean in, like physically be together, because you know these structures get set up where we're in our own spaces and not even doing that. Which brings me to something that we talked about too, which is like the ways that jazz education has started to mimic a classical education, and like there's been some decades now of methodology.
Yes.
And your feelings about that.
I'm mixed, you know.
Yeah.
I went through the school music education system, like so many of the musicians I play with. Methodology is the word. I think we're taking this beautiful, magical thing that we all know and love, which is music, and trying to fit it into some kind of a method of syllabus and test and grade and degree that says you are qualified to work in the field, when we know that's not quite how it works in music, right? You can't wave your degree to Herbie Hancock and say, Mr. Hancock, I'm ready for my gig, you know? I think that discussion about what is being done in a healthy way in music education and what are some things that might be falling into that, I don't know if it's just a methodology trap, but some kind of traps, you know? I think there are a lot of musicians who come out of these schools having built certain kinds of crutches in the way they experience music, just to pass that test, you know? So with music, I think the truth, and really all knowledge, the truth is that you have to go to the person and deal with them where they are, right? And every syllabus should essentially be personalized, you know? So if a student comes to the table and says, you know, I love Beethoven, I love Bob Marley, I love Charlie Parker, and I love Kendrick Lamar. What do? You know, how do you start to pick that apart and serve that? And you know, while studying all of those craft-based things that I think do lend themselves to some of those methodological approaches. You know, knowing how to play an instrument requires playing your scales, playing your arpeggios, your long tones, your rudiments, that foundational stuff. It's a craft. So that can be taught and put into that sort of formalized way, and I think there's some good being done. But yeah, certainly I think all these years of that methodology in some ways has created some it's taken some of the life out of the expression, I would say.
The life. Yeah. And I don't know, I may over-romanticize this. I over-romanticize a lot of things. But for me, one of the magical things about this tradition has always been like the lineage of it, the passing it down. And especially as, what would you say, a semi-written tradition, right? I mean, going back and sort of traveling through American history and these really transformational moments, and this tradition gets handed off one human to another. So I wonder how that, is affecting the life.
I think we just have to get creative about how we think the best way to nurture those hungry musicians actually is. It might be, if what we're talking about here is all an extension of like blues, right? Of blues-based music. How do we best explore that? How do we best understand that? The classroom might not be in the building where it is right now. It might be actually starting at 8 or 9 p.m. at the Village Vanguard, wherever. I don't know. It might be on like a breakdancing battle somewhere, in the Lower East Side. I don't know, But I think it's all relevant. I think that's part of the question we should be asking ourselves when we're putting together this methodology. Is what's the best way to really serve the music? What's the best way to talk about it, to encourage people to keep that sense of mystery and wonder and magic about it while studying the craft,
Your dad and, these much older musicians that you work with, when they talk about their education, do you feel like their experience was just totally different? And they're stepping into their inhabiting of the music and their interpretation and imagination of the music. Did that have a different slant to it?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, how lucky we are that we have millions of minutes of music in the palm of our hands, and in other ways, how cursed we are, right? Like they were really able to just focus on that one track on the vinyl player, and you got to, put it right in the right spot. It's a different process, a different ritual in learning and understanding, and there weren't those schools that there are now, for better and for worse, right? That they got to just like learn on the bandstand from these masters. And I think in some ways, with something that is an artistic expression, that is a language, there's no substitute for just going straight to the source and going on the bandstand with Art Blakey. That was an institution. Betty Carter, that was an institution. Miles Davis, all these folks who really just come up and play. Like, what are we playing? This tune you don't know. Well, I don't know it. Well, you'll hear it, and just go. So I think this is not, news. It's not like folks in jazz education don't know this, music education don't know this. And there is an effort to try to educate with that in mind. But how successful it is, I don't know. I guess it's a conversation.
Do you know this clip? There's this clip of Ellington and Bernstein together in 1963, and they're talking about this moment where jazz and symphonic traditions are coming together. And they're talking about how the audience is shifting and the spaces are shifting. Like now you're hearing jazz in the concert hall and you're hearing, whatever Bernstein was doing at the time. But it's so interesting because they're really like foreseeing what's going to happen.
Wow. Yeah, those cats are prophets.
Yeah, they were.
I love that conversation too, that notion that, the music belongs in a certain place versus another, and maybe the healthy thing for both musics is to get a little dose of the other, maybe we should take the Carnegie Hall acts and put them down here in a basement club, and some of these brilliant musicians that I hear down here in the club should be on the Carnegie Hall stage, and how that affects the music, how that affects the public's relationships to the music, understanding of it, assessment of it. It's fascinating stuff.
And also, we should all be in neither of those places. We should be in all the other places where no one has tickets to hear the music, right? More than anything.
Yeah, right? off limits? What do you mean off limits?
I was speaking recently with someone in the the classical presenting field, and he was talking about commissioning. And he was talking about this 100-year cycle where we're always discovering things, rediscovering things from 100 years ago, and everything else in the middle gets lost. And so he was like, how do we shorten this 100-year cycle so that we're also connected with what happened 50 years ago and 30 years ago? And I thought, yeah, okay, well, in a tradition that goes back 300, 400 years, I get that. That's 100 years. That seems like a healthy chunk. But actually, so if jazz is actually 100-year cycle, then it means that what you're rediscovering has got to be shorter. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I hear that. On the 100-year cycle, I think you're right. You can't argue that. For me, like when I'm checking out the music and where it was to where it is, you know, you can do it in decades too. So yeah, it's true. It's only been 100 years. And yet there's so much in there you could spend a lifetime. I mean, you know, you could spend a lifetime just trying to figure out how to play a blues or rhythm changes. Like it's really, it is never ending.
Yeah.
So I love that. And if we open ourselves to that great Duke Ellington adage that there really only is good and bad music, keep going. You know, maybe then it actually is more than 100 years.
Exactly.
You know, maybe if we're just connecting the dots between a kind of an essence of expression, you know, maybe blues is the intelligent like root of it, but go further, go back to Africa, you know, go back to Pangea, like you know, it's endless. So.
It's endless.
Yeah.
So if you had to predict, what is this decade?
Yeah, I think I think it's smart to look to the 20s for a lot of maybe just some good old practical lessons post-pandemic type of stuff. So I'm like an older millennial, and I think maybe the mission of my generation might be to be a glue from the before internet times to the post, right? That we can maybe help say to the new generation, yes, go like manifest the vision of peace that we all want, but don't forget about these values. You know, don't forget to look at what is lost when we decide to do things this way versus the way they've been done. So, you know, I guess that's the mission.
You know, I thought it was super interesting. Samara Joy was on the show.
Yes.
And here's this girl who's 23 who's doing old school standards. And I mean, the way you just described it, that's really well said. I mean, it's the glue. She's also like using that space, but her fans are so young that this 100-year cycle means nothing to them, and they hear this music as new. And something that I talked about with her, what does it mean to sing a song from the 1920s with lyrics from the 1920s and like a whole envelope, but without the baggage, without the constraints, you know, the racial and cultural constraints of the 1920s. What does it mean to step into this music, you know, with kind of the air to breathe that we have now?
Yeah.
That's a lot as well.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot. And I think that's where when I'm just the piano player, I get back to the craft. You know, I sort of get back to work. I put my head down and I just try to get back to serving the music. Because I definitely acknowledge that this conversation about the narrative of where we are as a society and how that's reflected in our art is valid and is present in the music. And at the same time, there is, you know, sort of a put your blinders on and just listen to that note and what that note is telling you to dream and imagine next, you know? And when I'm doing that, I don't know that I'm actually thinking about all of these larger narratives and issues. You know, it's not to say that they aren't part of what I mean to express, and it absolutely is part of what I'm dreaming is behind that note. You know, it's what's in my emotions, my feelings, and my attitudes when I play. But yeah, sometimes it's just like this is a note and it wants another one. I'm gonna find it. You know, it could be that simple. I definitely try to keep up with what's happening in the world and be about good things and stand behind movements and communities and things that are positive, that are in line with my thinking of, yeah, we should love each other more. We should live in peace. We should get rid of all the bad stuff. We should, you know, if there's an injustice, let's try to make it just, you know. And at the same time, I think day to day, your experience is I go into an elevator and here are these 4 people, and my gig, again, is living harmoniously in this elevator with these 4 people. Yeah. And that's your own political protest in that moment, that if you're writing a song, you just play a song in the moment, that's your political protest in that moment. And to be cool with that, I think that finding a way to make it personal is there's something there. There's some kind of, might be a goal.
I feel like Ellington had a quote about that too. I feel like he had quotes about everything.
He's a great thinker. I love the quote about the bags under his eyes. He's, some interviewer asks him about, well, you're famous for the bags under your eyes. He says, oh, these are my virtues. Don't make fun of my virtues. I worked hard for these. So it's really charming.
So here's another quote I want to throw at you. This is from a poem by Rita Dove. And I'm loving the idea of closing these conversations with this quote, because I think there's something that we're experiencing that's about like something new. So this is from her poem Testimonial, and it goes like this. Back when everything was still to come, luck leaked out everywhere. I gave my promise to the world, and the world followed me here.
Beautiful. Yeah. The line about luck, it makes it feel so youthful. So, it's really looking forward. I hope it's the beginning of a journey, and I suppose this promise to the world is the mission statement. It's our North Star. I relate to that. I still feel like the kid in high school who's again trying to figure out what note goes after that note. I think if I have a promise to the world, it's just to like continue to serve that, it's to really try to serve the music as best I can and try to serve the environment I'm in as best I can and try to live harmoniously with my fellow humans.
Fellow elevator riders.
Yeah, exactly. Fellow passengers. Yeah.